Okay, thank you very much, Marta, and welcome everyone to Workshop A, which is all about living with viruses. It's an interesting workshop, and we're going to hear from the University of Ghent shortly on this. And it's essentially, this workshop is about a science communication project developed at the University of Ghent. We are now recording this as well, and as has been mentioned. And so perhaps the thing that we can do first off is we're going to move through different stages of this workshop, but we want to get a little bit of interaction and discussion going with you shortly. But first we might actually meet, I was about to say we might actually meet the contestants, but we won't. They're actually the people from the University of Ghent who are going to present most of the workshop. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen with everyone. Sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen. My internet connection is very slow, but we're getting there, I think.
You can. You only have to share screen, okay? Because I gave you permission.
Okay. Can people see that?
No. Not yet, Andrew.
No. Okay.
Perhaps I can. You want me to go and get the PowerPoint as an emergency?
Just hold on a second. It should be able to work. My system is telling me I'm doing all of the right things. So this is it's a little bit strange.
Meanwhile, Frédéric, perhaps you can pass me the PowerPoint from the Humboldt University backup. Can you do that?
Yes, you already have it. No.
You have it?
No.
You don't have it? Okay.
I have it, otherwise I start up mine.
But you need yours, right?
Yes, I have it.
Oh, okay, I just need the link to go to Humboldt University. I don't have it at hand to pick the thing up.
Okay, yes. My computer seems to be rather confused. Either it's my computer's rather confused or I'm rather confused, one of the two. But I'm showing the PowerPoint, and it's obviously, it's obviously not coming up for everyone.
Yeah. Well, it's Dominic.
Yes.
Dominic started showing it. Excellent.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on.
Okay. Okay, let's talk just briefly to start off with on why we are doing this this workshop. It is, as has been mentioned, a workshop entitled Living with Viruses, an approach for informing and educating against all conspiracy odds. And it is a technique that has been developed at the University of Ghent. And it's been a collaboration between the Ghent University Museum and a researcher in their Department of Education there as well. So what I might do first off is introduce the people who are going to be involved in this workshop, and then we'll move into the content. So if you want to just move that on one slide there. These people here are the ones who are going to be going to be performing for you today. Dominic, my name firstly is Andrew Simpson, and my only role here is as a moderator, and so I'll be mainly involved in the conversations that we get into after the model has been presented. But first of all, let me introduce Dominick Verschelde. Dominic is a marine biologist with expertise in taxonomy. He's the Ghent University Museum Zoology Collections Manager and the Sciences and Research and Education's Coordinator. And in doing this, he aims to be a bridge between the public and the collections of the university and link them to both the research of the university and the education programs of the university. Also, we have with us Hanne Windels, and Hanne is a bioengineer who has recently finished an education master's thesis on the topic of living with viruses at the Faculty of Bioscience Engineering in cooperation with the Ghent University Museum. And in doing this, she focuses on critical and scientific thinking in the context of the current pandemic. And this is the main structure and theoretical approach behind this science communication program that we're going to have a look at shortly. Also with us today, we have Professor Kathy Messens. Kathy is an associate professor in the Department of Biotechnology in the Faculty of Biosciences, Bioscience Engineering, and her research focuses on the genetics behind the flavour of cocoa and chocolate, something that I feel like I need some of right at this very moment. And Kathy teaches a wide variety of courses from biotechnology through to nutrition. Also with us, we have Professor Mieke Uyttendaele. And Mieke is a professor in food microbiology at the Department of Food Technology, Food Safety and Health of the Faculty of Bioscience Engineering. She's also the Faculty Director of Education and Internationalisation, and is also someone who's been engaged with the Education Masters program in Science and Technology. Okay, so these are the people who have all been involved in developing this project. And so let's now hand over to Dominic, who will tell us a bit about it. Thank you, Dominic.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me correctly? Good enough?
Yep,
perfect.
all good.
Go
okay.
on.
So nowadays I'm the zoology collections curator or manager, and I also am responsible for science and education's coordination between the Ghent University Museum and the faculties of science. You can see that a few pictures of the new museum. On the right, you have a drawing from a locally famous artist that is depicting on the completely height of the building. And the problem we had with the Ghent University Museum is that we have about 7 completely different collections, and that we had to unite them in one, in one museum. And so we thought maybe we have to talk about how science works, how the scientific method works, and the importance of critical reasoning. And so you can see that we have a part on chaos. The second is doubt. So chaos, doubt. Also, we have one about knowledge, about ordering, measuring, and so step by step we explain how science works. Myself, I have always been dedicated to tell people about the scientific method. I think it's very, very important. And for me, it's informing the public about what is present, what it can be known, what we don't know yet, just being honest. And especially, I want to give people the tools to think for themselves. Every scientist has an open but very critical mind towards any idea or thought. So for instance, does God exist? I cannot say he doesn't, because I can't prove he doesn't exist. But I don't believe, so I don't have to accept the fact that God exists because it hasn't been proven yet. And so that's the idea. Think for yourself, be critical, and think about what all the things you can learn or see, and try to form your own idea before. So don't let anybody else tell you what to do. A very important thing about communication is that's very difficult. Everybody knows the picture on the left. It's something from Windows where you normally put your own photograph in it. But if you look at the second, where you put some eyes inside of the head, then you will see it as a figure. But if you go to the third picture and you put the eyes on the outside, it's just a mean looking, very angry person, which sometimes we also feel when we're working with computers. The second is also, or the right, I'm sorry, a picture about influencing. You can ask a question to somebody and they don't know the answer. But the moment somebody says anything, they are all agreeing that that is what they see. If you show children the picture on the right, nobody knows at first glance what they are seeing. And one says, oh, I see the head of an Indian. And then at that time, so a Native American, at that time, everybody sees that. But in fact, it's wrong, because it's a picture or drawing of somebody wearing a very heavy coat in a very bad weather. And so you see the head, the mantle, and the legs underneath it. So, but at that time, it's very, very difficult to say to people, no, you're not seeing an Indian, it's something else. And so that's the pitfalls for communication, is that first impressions are important. And secondly, we are very easily influenced.
Yes, hello everybody. Nice to get to meet you. And I'm Mieke Uyttendaele, very difficult Flemish name, I know. So we were happy to work with Dominic in the Ghent University Museum. I'm more in food microbiology, so foodborne viruses, and there we go to viruses, that's where we made the connection. And I'm also involved in the educational master program. So what is the educational master program about? Well, we have our faculty is in the part on science and technology, and we want, after they graduate with us at the faculty, like Hanne did, we also want them to go, really, some of them want to go to teaching, and we are short of very good teachers in our program, as is nowadays all over in our newspapers. So we're happy we have people who are, and we want to train them in 1 year as being professionals in learning processes for high schools, for teenagers, which, and Hanne is already an expert in her disciplinary field, of course, because she graduated from our faculty, but we also want them to be innovators. So as part of their educational program, they have to do a quite restricted master thesis, because Hanne did already do a full master thesis, but in that way, we really want to connect between our sciences faculty and our educational faculty, and we were so happy to be able, in this particular case study, also to connect with the Ghent University Museum, to really have a kind of didactical master thesis dissertation where we can combine not only our know-how on science, but also know-how on education, but also know why. And then we come back to critical thinking, and the program, the thesis was about what is the best approach on how to make this happen. Okay, so we have another colleague here, so we're shifting.
Okay, so my turn now. I'm glad to meet you all online. So my name is Messens. I'm a colleague of Mieke. In fact, I'm more into biotechnology. So there is the link with the viruses on a biotechnological scale, let's say. As Andrew told you, my research is about genetics as well, but on cocoa and chocolate. Of course, chocolate, you all know, Belgium very famous for that, so I'm also into that. Lucky to do that as well. And I teach lots of courses, so from applied biotechnology to nutrition, so very diverse courses. And Mieke already explained a lot, but in fact, I'm like more of an assistant coordinator. So I'm learning a lot from Mieke into the educational master program. So during my assistance, let's say, I was also very happy to meet my colleagues and to work on the thesis of Hanne. So why undertaking this workshop? So of course, our masters in science and educational sciences, bioengineering are trained for problem solving and also in fact applying technology to support society. So this is in general. And I have put in this slide like an aim and a why. So the aim is to further invest in very interdisciplinary research at the nexus of educational science and also applied biological sciences. Yeah? And the why is in fact to enhance the best didactical practices. So this is here the workshop then, fit for purpose and to raise enthusiasm and understanding for high school students on how science works and also how technology impacts society. So this is in a nutshell. So now the word to Hanne.
So I'm Hanne, I'm a master thesis student. So I finished my master thesis already in 2020 for bioengineering, but now I've followed an extra year in educational master program in science and technology. And the topic of my thesis was living with viruses. So as Andrew already explained, it was a cooperation between the Faculty of Bioscience Engineering and the Ghent University Museum. And the idea actually came from the current pandemic. So COVID-19 brought a wave of information upon us, also misinformation and uncertainty, not only for us, but also for scientists. So for generally everybody who lives, it was a wave of information, a real tidal wave. And this can result in misunderstanding and also in paranoia. So I was thinking, you need more than only information about viruses. You need some background information about scientific thinking and also about media awareness. And this all came together in my thesis, Living with Viruses. So the main question of my thesis was, how can we promote scientific thinking and media awareness in youth? So first, I investigated what is already given in schools here in Belgium about viruses and what is mandatory and what is optional in schools. And then I saw that teachers in non-scientific educational programs don't need to give a lot of information about viruses. However, they are encouraged to do so, but it's on their own initiative. Then I investigated a bit more about how you can educate scientific thinking and what is the importance of education about this skill, and also about media awareness. What are those skills and how can we improve this in youth? And first, scientific thinking. The basic idea I found first was that scientific thinking is not the same as reasoning in a scientific context. It's broader. So you need to expand it a bit. It's actually, thinking about the world and how to generate new knowledge. And it's very important there to be aware that no scientist has the truth in his hand. So you need to be critical all the time. And not only scientists, but everybody. You have to be critical every day of your life, actually. And it's also a social thing, science. Scientists improve each other, they correct each other to improve new knowledge. And when I looked on the internet, I found a lot of teacher packages about how you can learn scientific thinking to pupils who don't know anything about it. And a lot of those packages start with, how does science work? What is science? And even though there are packages available, a teacher keeps playing a crucial role, because a teacher has to, keep saying that scientific thinking is not the same as just blindly believing everything a scientist says. So it's very important to keep that in mind as a teacher and to teach this to your students. And then you have media awareness. It was a second skill I read about, and I think it's also connected to the current pandemic. So this can be defined as the knowledge and skills you need to use media critically, actively, and consciously. And both scientific thinking and media awareness are skills. So they can be acquired at a certain moment in time. You can improve it constantly in a process of lifelong learning. And that was why I coupled these two together. With the current pandemic in mind, I've chosen the topic living with viruses, but these skills can be coupled to many other topics as well. So here for my thesis, this topic was chosen, but media awareness and scientific thinking can be improved with other topics as well. And here you see preparation I had in mind for this. So first I made a teacher package with all the information that I collected about viruses. So it's like a full package with all the information I think students should know about viruses. The teacher can give 1 or 2 lectures about this topic, about viruses. And with this basic knowledge about viruses, the teacher and the pupils can come to a museum. There, they can get a guided tour about media awareness and scientific thinking with the collections that are present at the museum. So every museum can do it a bit differently based on what they have there in their museum. And then we can go over to a moderated discussion in which scientific thinking, media awareness, and the background knowledge about viruses all come together. So students really need to use all those new skills together to discuss about questions and statements about viruses. But it's very important here that the goal of this discussion is to encourage pupils to think critically and scientifically and media aware about those statements, and that it is not only about viruses, but that they can use those new skills in their future life and also about other topics.
Okay, so in a nutshell, what did we do? We want teachers to be able to teach their school children things that sometimes they don't even know themselves. So that's why the program, the package was made. They discuss beginning in that school, they look at the knowledge, they start discussing and prepare a few questions to come to the museum where we start a moderated debate, moderated discussion. So based on a few questions, we start discussing with everybody what is done, what is the case here, what do you believe, what do you think is happening, what do we know, what do we don't know. And they can, the nice thing is that people, the students that are convinced of something, that you can start have them shift their ideas about things. And that's, you could say, what we want to do today with you. We made this, we tried to have a good package, and we want to start the discussion with you to see if it works. So for one of the things that came to mind is a virus alive? Is that a living organism? So there are already discussions on that, and if you don't know the answer to that, or if you have those discussions, but laymen to be thinking about it if we scientists don't know the answer. So things like that are things that we can use in the discussion group at the museum. And so I will give one of the questions that you can see on the slide is one of the ones that we have been hearing a lot in Belgium too. Do I get vaccinated or not? And when people don't want to be vaccinated, do we make it voluntary, or even say to the people you have to do it? So things like that are a lot of discussions that are being held in society and that we also have to be open to. So I would like to give the scepter to Andrew to start what we are going to do and try to do now.
Okay, thank you, Dominic, and thank you to all of our colleagues from the University of Ghent for producing such an interesting and challenging workshop project. So let's think about some of those questions and considering them, and let's also reflect on some of our own experiences. And just in terms of that, I'd just like to reflect briefly on our experiences in Australia. We've currently have a COVID-19 Delta variant outbreak. This is another question too that I'd love to see some discussion on in terms of people's understandings of the different variations of the COVID disease itself. Now, there is only a relatively small group of us here today, so we're probably going to ask everyone's opinions on some of these questions. But in Australia, for example, we have politicians who are members of the government saying that vaccination is actually dangerous and that people should not get vaccinated. They're more at a chance of dying by being vaccinated than by actually catching COVID. And if you look even at just basic statistics, this is just outrageous. But the statistics don't bear it out at all in just about any study that I've seen. All the stats say that if you are vaccinated, yes, you can still catch the virus, but perhaps its impact on your system will be a lot less. You will have some defenses. Also, there might be less chance that if you are vaccinated and catch the virus, that you'll pass that on to somebody else. So there's obviously lots of very, very poor levels of understanding out there in the public, at least in Australia. That's been our experience. And now we have our government is telling us that if we get to 70% double doses of vaccination, then we can start to open up a bit more. Then we can sort of start returning to some sort of semblance of normal life. Then there are other people who will do a whole lot of modeling and say, no, we need to have at least 80% double dose vaccinations delivered to the population, and then we can open up. And then there are others who will say that, well, everyone should get vaccinated if they intend to actually participate in normal society. Okay, if you don't want to get vaccinated, that's fine, but you can go off and live as a hermit and not have any interactions with the rest of society. So there is lots of sort of incredibly different viewpoints on this. And I'm happy to share my personal viewpoint. I really think that vaccination should be compulsory. It's a public health benefit. There were times when society was threatened with things such as polio and measles and all sorts of other diseases, and people just accepted the fact that they had to get vaccinated. It was for the common good. But now we have people who are saying, well, no, it's dangerous. It can actually it can actually sort of ruin your health getting vaccinated. And these are media outlets will actually promote some of these positions themselves. So, yeah, Dominic's put the question there up on the screen. Should the vaccine be presented as a choice to the public, or should it be obligatory? I, for one, think it should be obligatory. I'd love to hear what other people think. Anyone care to make a comment? Anybody here amongst our group who believe that vaccination shouldn't be obligatory?
There's Tanya,
Anyone
Andrew. Andrew,
brave
can
enough?
you see the raised hands? There's Frédéric.
Oh, we
and
have
Tanya.
a raised hand, do we?
Yeah, we do. Look at the screens. Left side, upper side. Okay, go on.
Rightio. Thank you very much. Tanya, please, what do you think?
Okay, oh, sorry, I'm not so sure my camera doesn't seem to work. Oh, no, now it's working.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry. I had my privacy screen on. I think it's a very dangerous thing to force things on the public, and especially here in South Africa, these kinds of things can lead to quite a bit of tension. So, in my opinion, I think it's more feasible to rather convince the people to take the vaccination, to see that as a benefit and sell it as a benefit, than to say, oh no, you must get vaccinated. It's a very difficult situation. I totally agree that people need to get vaccinated, make no mistake, but it's a very difficult and sensitive field, and also I think the media plays a very important, the social media plays a very important role, and I think there needs to be some restrictions on what actually gets published in terms of, you know, if you get vaccinated, they're going to inject you like a chip and track all your movements, kind of thing. So that that needs actually to be filtered out and banned totally from any type of social media.
Thank you, Tanya. That's a terrific contribution. And yes, we hear these conspiracies. The government, when you get a vaccine, the government will inject a microchip into you, which will help to control your behaviour. Frédéric, what's your opinions on this question? Should vaccine be a choice, or should it be obligatory?
Hi, Andrew. It's a very difficult question, because as a personal opinion, I think that people has to be vaccinated and it has to be an obligatory. But who I am to say that, because, you know, I'm not a biologist, I'm not medicine, I'm not a doctor, and not a specialist in virus. And I'm not a specialist in public governmental decision about health, and so I think that my opinion is we have, as university, have to choose one voice and one opinion, and even if it's difficult to have one voice, because it's democracy, and we, even if we are researcher, we have right to have different opinions, of course. But I think that university have to spread the truth and the right opinion. But I'm not sure that all the specialists, even in the university, have the same opinion about that. So that's a very difficult question, and that's why I want to say something about it, even if I'm agree I don't have the answer and I don't have the right answer. But my personal opinion is yes, it has to be an obligation.
That's terrific. That's terrific, and yeah, it's interesting too what you say there about how universities must represent the truth. Yeah, do they represent the truth? I mean, I guess that's another question that we could also debate. And are there such things as scientific truths that should actually guide people's behavior and guide people's decision making.
Andrew, can I comment on that?
Please do, Dominic, yes.
I don't agree with the saying that the university should take one opinion and follow that. In this case, it doesn't work. We are scientists, but we have to offer as much as we can all possibilities to the public. As Frederick said, not everything is knowledgeable about science, and so it's our job to say all the pros and contras. And in this case, we can't say you have to do it, but we can talk about the pros if you make it obligatory. We have the example in Belgium that even healthcare takers, so people from hospitals, were anxious and doubtful to have the vaccination. But if people from the medical side of society refuse a vaccine, what are laymen to think about that? That's a very, very bad example. And on the other hand, we have vaccinations which are obligatory, and they made that such illnesses disappeared. So it is a discussion with pros and contras. I think we have to give all the pros and contras of both possibilities, but also say, okay, if you have a vaccination, you can have your life back. If you don't, you will, as you said, you will have to live as a hermit, because we can't have it that you get other people sick. So it is a discussion. We can't really take a decision in what to do, but we have to inform the public what are the contras if you don't, and the pros if you do.
Yeah, that seems to be quite true, and it's
can I say
interesting.
Something?
Yeah, please do, Martha.
No, just to add to what Dominic said, which I agree, of course, is that it's not only the pros and cons, but in a moving situation like COVID, where knowledge about the virus was, unknown virtually. Okay, so there was everything to be researched and so on. I think it's very important, it's essential that we as museum professionals and we as communicators, public communicators of science, that we explain that science in the making, research in the making, doesn't have absolute certainties. Because one of the problems, I think, of the conspiracy theories is that, a lot of people gave opinions, and even scientists often, because it was a very moving, highly moving, remember, first it was only 2 weeks, then you cannot wear masks because you are putting in danger the nurses and so on. And so the situation was rapidly moving, and it was our obligation to say, look, to say the truth. The only truth is we don't know.
Yeah.
We have no idea where this is going. We're doing our best, so it's more like you have to be more transparent with the public. People are not stupid.
Absolutely. And of course, we must remember that this was the fastest development of a vaccine in history, and people were still gathering data while things were being approved and going through different processes and things like that. And I think that touches on a very, very important point about the actual nature of the scientific process itself. And
Andrew?
we as science communicators need to be aware of that. Yeah.
Andrew, may I say something?
Please do, Marie. Welcome.
I agree with what Martha said. It's mostly a question about education and information. And I think that we should trust our universities a lot in this case. Personally, I'm for compulsory vaccination. But in Sweden, we have been we have not taken the compulsory way, so to say. And what I can see here in Uppsala, university city where I live, we have now 90% of the people vaccinated. And the healthcare persons, they took the example, they went out with information and also with booking possibilities to all areas, also the migration areas around Uppsala. And there we now have also vaccination going to youth and to children. And in my home city on the west coast, Gothenburg, a much bigger city, they still have problems that people only are vaccinated to 50 to 60%. And they have huge problems in those areas around the city with a lot of migration people. And now they have learned that they must work a lot with going out to people with in different languages, and information is absolutely necessary. So they are now having a lot of people again affected by the new viruses in the Gothenburg area. And we cannot take responsibility if we don't inform and people have the possibility to learn to know what absolutely is the real most important facts about the virus. So that's my opinion. Okay.
That's an excellent opinion too, and it seems to be in line with the opinions that have already been expressed by other people here. And it's very interesting too, in as much as I guess the misinformation becomes very dangerous when somebody's opinion in the media is put forward as a fact. And particularly when it's politicians or celebrities or people who attract a lot of attention who will promulgate these sort of, false ideas, that's when it becomes very dangerous, because it can impact on how people behave. Anybody else got some thoughts they'd like to share on this question of whether the vaccine should be presented as a choice to the public, or whether it should be obligatory? I'd love to hear from you, Fatima, as to what the situation is like in Iran at the moment with COVID.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
I hope all of you are fine. Actually, this discussion is interesting for me. It is interesting for me that because of I think in Australia, in Sweden, in Portugal, universities are speaking for I think first level, and the governments here are hearing them. But unfortunately, as the other problems in my country, especially after COVID-19, the people cannot trust the universities because of they are speaking about, for example, internal vaccination, and actually they are stopped for buying vaccination for the people. Actually, in Iran, I think 10% of people are vaccinated until now, and we cannot choose. Actually, this is public or obligatory, and we have problem for choosing this election, actually. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Fatima. It's interesting what you say, because in some ways there are some similarities with Australia, in as much as there are people who say that the governments who make decisions about which groups of people get vaccinated when, what vaccines are offered to which groups of people. There are people who say that the government is not following the advice of health professionals or universities. So that same element of a disconnect between what the government might be doing and what the universities or health professionals might be recommending is definitely something that we see here as well. And that causes problems because there are plenty of people who work with elderly people in aged care and even in the health system itself who aren't vaccinated. And we're now 18 months into the pandemic in Australia, and it's extraordinary that these kind of things haven't been figured out yet. So anyway, it's interesting. Anybody else got some thoughts on whether
something more, Andrew?
Please do, Dominic. Yes.
I agree with Inge-Marie and Marta of what they were saying, but as far as we are concerned, those are two separate things. So here the first question was, is vaccination something that people can choose, or is it compulsory? Yep. But the fact what Marta was saying is that we have to inform the public of also what we don't know. I agree, we agree totally, because that's what we state in Hanne's thesis as a beginning. You have to be honest to the people by saying that we know and that we don't know. We are not God, we are not omnipotent. There's a lot of things that we don't know, and that's why we do research to find out. But so that's the question we posed here was just to get things going. And actually the second is about that. What do we know and how does science works? And so if it wants to listen to me, where is my pointer? Okay. So this is, you could say a figure what is happening when you do science, but one of the things that is not literally on that is, indeed, we have to say it's only when you're honest that people will listen to you. And that starts by saying we don't know everything. We do research to learn. And in case of the pandemic, researchers of all over the world have combined their efforts. And that's why it went so fast. That's an answer you can give to people who say, normally it takes 10 years to produce a vaccine, and now it was in 1 year, so it will be a bad one. No, it is not a bad one, but the whole entire effort of science all over the world combined, and that's why it went in that manner. So.
Yep, I think that's very important, and I think that what you've struck on a really central point there, Dominic, and that is the importance of being completely honest and transparent in the communications on this issue. And I think that that's fundamental, and without that, without building that sort of trust between civil society and university researchers, then we're not really going to get anywhere towards sort of getting people to behave in the right way, if you like, in a sort of an optimal fashion when there are such health challenges as this. So yeah, I mean, personally, I'd agree with you that here's the next question you've posted there: can the scientific method and critical reasoning help to raise media literacy? Can it help the community against misinformation and consequent fear or even panic? We would certainly hope that is the case, but we'd love to hear other people's views on whether that is the case or not. And yeah, someone in the chat there has brought up the very interesting point that we have to acknowledge that there are very few journalists who are trained to address scientific issues, and that news media have maybe one or two maximum, and all of a sudden all journalists started writing about science. And it's obviously a disaster to have people reporting on science who don't understand how science works. That's a very good point. So why isn't it that our universities are producing greater numbers of good science communicators that can help convey the correct and more useful messages to the broader society. This really is an interesting issue. Where are all the science communicators who are going to facilitate this kind of work? Why is it so hard for someone with a knowledge and an understanding of science to get a role as a journalist? Why do news outlets hire so few journalists with expertise and understanding of science? What do people think? How can we do something about this? Apart from getting everyone to attend one of Dominic's and Hanne's sessions as a school children, I think that would be very good for them indeed. But, you know, given the fact that they're only just starting this and they can't educate the whole of the world overnight, what else can we do? What do people think?
On that note, Andrew, everybody is very welcome.
Yes.
That's good. Okay, I think it's a very interesting question. It sort of actually reminds me of some of the things that were said in the keynote presentation this morning from Henry McGee. You know, universities really are in a critical position here in terms of the potential of the sort of good works that they can do. But they need to be sort of driven by, not so much by economics, they need to be driven more by the sustainable development goals that that Henry was talking about today, and other sort of factors. Yeah, does anyone like to say, oh, we have Tanya, please.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again.
Don't apologize for turning up more than once. That's fine. You're welcome.
As I said, I can only say it from a South African perspective, and I mean, what really was quite amazing was that the politicians this time actually listened to the scientists, and they brought up all the information, the scientific information, and so on. But still, the reluctancy of people to get vaccinated is still very high. So I think the scientific method and critical reasoning only gets some societies only that far. And what you probably need is more like a champion, and I have to say, sorry, maybe like an actor or something like this that people rely on, or you know, a champion in the communities, especially in the rural areas, that promote these kinds of you know, promote things like vaccinations and so on. As I said, sometimes I think people are a little bit overwhelmed by the scientific information that they get, and they would rather listen to, you know, the buddy next door who had some experience or whatever, instead of, you know, listen to the scientists. And this is what we see quite a lot, you know, when it comes to scientific issues.
Yeah, that's a very good point indeed, Tanya. People like to have their information all parceled up neatly, and people will come to incredible conclusions about information. You know, my grandmother had a very bad headache once, so she got a cat and rubbed it on her head, and all of a sudden the headache was gone. So everyone should rub their heads with cats to get rid of headaches and things like that. So do we need influencers and celebrities to have a big impact on how people think about these kinds of things? Is that useful? Does anybody know any celebrity or influencer who is scientifically valid and sound, and only has a good understanding of the scientific process?
We have
I think maybe Dominic and Hanne could be it actually.
It was when television started in Belgium, so we are talking about 60 years ago. And there was one weatherman, Armand Pin. So he talked about the weather every day on television. And it was the first, we only had one channel. And well, two, Flemish-speaking one and a French-speaking one. That was it. And Armand Pin came with the weather every day. And for some people, he became a god, especially for the elderly. What Armand Pin said was the truth, and they had to do. And at one time, when he normally, because he did it for 30 or 40 years, giving the weather on Belgium, at one time, when I was already a curator of the zoology collection, I organized an exhibition. And I sent the fax to Armand Pin to say, I'm doing this exhibition. And I was lucky enough that Armand Pin, in his weather talk, talked about my exhibition. And then people came because Armand Pin had said that they had to go. That was the reasoning. We were told by that person that we had to see that exhibition, so we are here. So it's true, it works.
That's fantastic. That backs up exactly what Tanya was saying. So all it means is we need to have the right influences and the right celebrities to make an impact. Yep.
Yeah, I was also thinking maybe it doesn't need to be a celebrity, but somebody you really trust. And that was why I kept thinking about pupils in schools, because they go home with the information. They talk to their parents about their classes. Their parents talk to their parents. And like this, it can spread very quickly. So like basic information about what is a vaccine and other things too, but it can spread really quickly among people you trust. And it can have a great impact that way.
Yep, and that's very true. And that kind of communication within the family is really important. I mean, when I was working in a university museum, I used to find that, yeah, if the kids felt they learned something from some kind of an education program, they would immediately take that home and sometimes bore their parents rigid with how great it was out of their sort of sheer enthusiasm. But this is what you say is quite right. And so what that has, it actually has a viral effect by spreading through the community in some ways. And in a way, it's kind of a form of inoculation against misinformation by learning that sort of good stuff and then sharing it enthusiastically with people. And I think this is really a very important role for university museums to actually generate enthusiasm for science and enthusiasm for ideas, and also to get across a sense of what those ideas can mean in terms of their impact on people's lives. And that's what makes doing the kind of work that you guys are doing here with this education program so important. I'm wondering.
Can I add something?
Please, Dominic.
No, it's Marta.
Oh, Marta, sorry. You guys sound very similar.
We do.
Yes, you both have the same pitch and intonation.
Right.
But please, Marta, go ahead.
No, I was thinking about how difficult it is to present to the public. It's not even present, because it's really to raise questions with the public, to present this science in the making thing and the processes of science and critical reasoning and the methods and so on. How difficult it is. And it's not by chance that we in museums, we don't do it much. Okay, we don't do it much because it's difficult, because we're used to not raise the questions which probably don't have any answers. Not even we know the answers. We're not used to that. It kind of challenges our authority and power and so on, but also because we don't have the object. We we collect, we kind of collect objects that are embodiment of truths, so to speak. For example, we tend to, I'm generalizing, but we tend to ignore scientific instruments that were cannibalized, for example, because they are not beautiful, because they are not, they have these parts, one part from the 19th century, one part from the 20th century, and so on. And so it's kind of, how are we going to interpret this? We don't have documentation. So sometimes we pass, so it's difficult. It's our responsibility because, of course, there's the role of journalists, there's the role of influencers, there's all that, and that's very important, and the kids and parents. But we also have a role to play, and the role to play in raising the questions about science, the right questions about science, even the ones that don't have answers today, or we may even never know. So that's difficult. It challenges our authority and questions
that's very interesting. A couple of things you've said there in terms of you're kind of implying that the process of curation in a way kind of hides a lot of the methodology that has perhaps swirled around the object when it's been used in scientific studies and things like that. And that's very, very interesting. And I wonder whether that is a fundamental aspect of collecting that disguises those things, because it's kind of like a reductionist process. You're taking an object out of context and you're keeping it for a reason that's to do with your collecting purpose and so forth.
And natural history collections, for example, because they have the series, but they, the research collections are barely ever shown, except for few. So sometimes we ignore the objects altogether, but in artificialia mostly, because they are not beautiful. There's not a beautiful complete thermometer that we can, display on a nice exhibition. Yep. Or in naturalia, we actually have the objects because they're all research collections, or most of them, but we don't show them because it's difficult again to show because of conservation constraints. But we have the material evidence of science in the making. Definitely, we do, or at least we could.
Yeah, it's like, as you say, that sort of process of connoisseurship does tend to sort of mask that, mask the sort of scientific nature or the scientific attributes of objects, which is what I think makes something like the Oxford University's History of Science Museum's collecting project around COVID so interesting, because as we'll hear about in the second keynote in this conference, it'll be interesting to see how their collecting process goes and whether things are being collected in terms of their relevance to the scientific methodology, or whether they're being collected purely for their sort of, what would you call it, the historicity or something, the historic nature, or the potential historic nature of the objects.
In fact, collected. In order to collect in order to collect, document, and then interpret and display science in the making, you have to switch from collecting the past to collecting the present. Okay.
Yes.
So there's a huge backlog, but it doesn't matter. You still have to keep your eye on the present because that's where the questions are.
That's right.
That's
especially with something like COVID. Yeah.
Exactly. That's where it's open. And that's also why historians don't like to deal with the present, because precisely the present is open.
Yeah, well, historians don't like to deal with the present because they're historians.
No, they hate they call it journalism. I don't know if any historian is here, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
I know. I understand what you're saying.
Andrew?
Yes, Dominic.
I would like to add something or respond to what Marta said and what you said.
Please do.
I agree I don't agree with the statement, Marta, that you say it's difficult. I have the experience that talking to children about this subject and about science is actually quite easy. A child's mind is like a big box and they just want to fill it. That's why they are open for any other thing that people are talking about. And if they don't have explanations or they don't have the true character behind it, they will just fantasize something because they want to fill their box in their head. And so I have the experience that if you explain, first of all, you have to say, indeed, we don't know anything, and they accept that. We don't know everything, and they accept that. But when you start discussing with them, they are the most interesting people to talk to and discuss about things because they are open to it. And that's, for me, it's not difficult, but it's very rewarding. And it's the perfect way to get to our next question, and that we want also what Marta said, we are not using objects, we are. And the question is a moderated, if it wants to work, yes? A moderated discussion. So when you discuss with all the people, but you present them with questions and try to talk about it, is that usable for other collections? We have indeed a natural history collection. It's a bit more easy, but are there any ideas in the group of having heard this, of which they say we could use that, and concerning an object like this? It's starting a discussion and having people or children think about things. When you have them think about something, they start asking questions in their mind and they become critical. And it's a quite simple process. It's a normal evolution. And so for me, I don't find it difficult. I find it rewarding and I like doing it. So the question now is this usable for other collections?
I think that's very interesting, some of the points you make there, Dominic, about how children's minds in particular are quite often very open to understanding things, and possibly much more so than many of the closed minds of adults. And some people might sort of ironically say, well, that's because they haven't been educated yet, and that's why they're open to all sorts of ideas. But yeah, it's very interesting. From what you were just showing there, I could suggest that I saw an image of a Tasmanian tiger, and what a perfect object for getting kids to talk about the idea of extinction. And in Australia, it's still an interesting topic, particularly in terms of that species. There are still people in Australia who believe it's not extinct. There are still some wild areas of Tasmania, and people who will say that there are still populations of these animals in the wild. I mean, who knows? But I mean, an object like that would be great for talking about extinctions, and obviously, then you can interrogate or explore some of the issues that have been touched on again in our keynote this morning about sustainable development criteria and goals, and it opens up questions about biodiversity and all sorts of other things. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too in terms of the points that Marta was making. I think from the model that you've presented here today, it seems to me to also be quite clear that while it's all very good having our museums collecting objects and things like that and thinking about how they can be used, we also need a highly skilled army of science communicators, such as Hanne, who will sort of use this methodology to structure and generate discussion amongst school kids, and hopefully inspire them to become interested, and hopefully that enthusiasm will then go and infect their parents and their friends, etc. But yeah, on our third topic, anybody with some other thoughts on the sorts of issues that can be explored in museums like this? this format of the moderated conversation, something like what we've attempted today. It would be interesting to hear whether anyone can suggest. I mean, we've sort of focused on the scientific issues, but are there other sort of cultural issues that could also be interrogated through a similar sort of a program? Or are there other scientific issues that should be explored? Or both? I think one of the great things I really like about this program is that you're being open about the fact that science is a culturally situated process, and that it is a process and an ongoing process, and things will change over time, and sort of ideas of truth will change over time. Frederick.
Yeah, I don't have a reaction, but almost a question for you about this program. Is it open also for professional? And by professional, I mean, for example, physicians working in private practice. I'm thinking about, you know, continuing education for this kind of public, and also a different public is workers inside the university, because I have a lot of colleagues who are not aware that university museums are also made for them, and they could give us some knowledge and discussions and so on. So do you think about this difference public?
What a fantastic question. Applications for lifelong learning just on this, just on this particular topic.
Well, I'm going in between now. So actually what we did with Hans thesis was made for an educational master for high school students. That's our first public, but I think it is an interesting thing, and I'm not talking a bit from my function of educational director, and Ghent University wants to put extra effort in this kind of lifelong learning curricula. So I do think it's a good idea to also invest in that, because of course the package and so on is made at a certain level, high school students, but then on the other hand, I know in the news they also aim at people who are 15, 16 years old. So I think if because we come as most of us from our bioscience engineering team, so we would know. So, but it's good to have that interdisciplinary and maybe indeed offer that. And I think for the Ghent University Museum, it would also offer to another type of public. So yeah, for sure, I think we have to think all our life, as I think Hanne said in the beginning, it's every day. So yeah.
So indeed, those skills, scientific thinking and media awareness, they can improve every day. So you can say, I have it all, I have everything in my mind. So you improve during the rest of your life. And with the package I've made, I've tested it on a number of subjects, let's say. For example, my parents, my elder sisters, and for them it was already quite new. And there was such an age gap. So I thought, yeah, we can use it even for adults that didn't have those scientific backgrounds beforehand. But also for other subjects, I think it's a very useful package. First, give some basic information that they can use in a discussion, not to say we have all the answers, but to get them thinking and maybe leave the museum with even more questions. But that's the start of a whole new step in their life.
And maybe to add to this, because the former question is on how science works, I think even if we are in research already a long time, I still think, and that's one of my ambitions I would have with the faculty here, is that a lot of our master students, but even PhD students, sometimes are too fond about getting in the lab and doing the research, and maybe do not think enough before they start. So even I think when we talk about how difficult it is to talk about science, to explain, is maybe because we ourselves are maybe too disciplinary, and we have to think quite wide and also learn about, reflect. So yeah, it's for all of us.
Frederik, I would like to add something also. It's for the moment, I have always worked like that. I make, for instance, an exhibition or guided tour, and I give it to any age. It's just how you're talking. This is now produced for teenagers, 15, 16 years old. But if you just don't use the big scientific terminology and explain it a bit more easy, then it's also good for 8 or 9-year-olds. It does work. As I said, they are inquisitive, they want to learn, and if you can explain it, they will understand it. And so at this time, we already discussed that a few weeks ago. It is available in Dutch, of course, for anybody who would ask. And we are planning to translate it to English. So anyone who is interested can have the teacher's package and the moderated discussion in English. So if you want it, just send me an email, and the moment it's translated to English, it will be available.
That sounds fantastic, Dominic. I think that, yeah, you've hit on the fact that it's probably got lots and lots of different applications with different age groups and different groups of people. I think that yeah, it certainly could work well. I'd love to see you try it on a group of senior university leaders and see how they react to it too. It'd be great to sort of, use the program to build awareness amongst the university community of the important role that they could play in sort of, transferring, in being a link between the academic world and the civic world with this kind of information and this kind of, structured, moderated debate. I think it's got enormous potential, and it could really be an important new role for universities to increasingly take on. Yeah. Anybody got some other thoughts on this? We still have a few minutes now before we close, so happy to hear some other voices on the topic.
Hello, Andrew.
Yes, Ingrid.
Yeah, I agree with Dominic. It's very important that university museums are acting as a learning platform for researchers in the university. When I started at the University Museum here in Uppsala, I invited also researchers to do mini exhibitions, learning how to form text and focus on pictures and so on, and also how to talk to youth, and both youth and adults. And I said, when you make an exhibition, think of a 12-year-old child and write the text for that person. And it will work also for any adult you meet from the audience outside the university. So this is a very important learning platform for all people in the university, and also learning that university museums are fantastic and have knowledge which most scientists and researchers don't have. Okay.
Yeah, terrific. I think I'd basically agree with that. It's very interesting that you took that approach yourself in your university museum work. Yeah, and as we also have a comment there from Marta, I think too that it's also an important training method. Using University Museum in this way as a sort of a training platform. Yeah, very, very interesting indeed. Anybody else with some final thoughts on this? Because I think I can see Hanne's approach taking over the world, taking it by storm. I think she needs to establish a company fairly quickly. and protect her intellectual property.
Maybe, Andrew, I could finish with an anecdote concerning what Frederick was asking and what Ingmarie just now said. A few years ago, I had a group of emeriti professors in civil engineering, and they were very knowledgeable. They were very high professors. They have been giving lessons and did research for many, many years. And they came to my humble collection of zoology. And I was talking to civil engineers about evolution and the characters of vertebrates, of fish and reptiles. And so I was talking and talking and talking, and they were listening, and no one said a peep. And when I finished, one of the professors in civil engineering said, I have heard that story before. And he emphasized I had to learn that when I was a youngster, but it's the first time in my life that I understood it. And so he actually thanked me that the explanation you give is very important. The way you present it is very important. And so I learned a 70-year-old professor, or in his 70s, about evolution. And as he said, it was the first time in his life that he understood how it went, and the first time he thought it was interesting. So, indeed.
That's fantastic, and maybe you used Ingmarie's method of pitching it to a 12-year-old, and that's why he was able to grasp the concepts this time or something. I think I've met one or two university leaders, but who, if you pitch something to them the way you'd pitch it to a 12-year-old, it might actually go straight over the tops of their heads. But hopefully there are fewer of those, and fewer of those people around. Look, we're getting a bit close to time now, so I think we might just wrap it up there, unless anyone has some other closing comments. I think I'd just like to say thank you very much to our colleagues from the University of Ghent, and congratulations on producing such an interesting and I think potentially very powerful methodology for science communication. And I look forward to hearing more about not only how this particular program develops and gets enhanced, but how it gets applied to different groups apart from school children, and how it gets applied to different topics as well. But it's been very interesting, and it's been great to hear firsthand from the people who have helped develop it and put it together. So at this point, I think we should all either wildly applaud our presenters or hit the appropriate Zoom button. And thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at other parts of this conference. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye. I will stop recording now. Thank you.
Okay, all good.
Bye.